All right, so we started a sermon series called "The Facts of Life," and we know that this sermon series is surrounded by a lot of different truths. One of those truths is that we're going to acknowledge and address some of the most misunderstood problems and issues that plague mankind. You see, if we're going to truly understand the deeper, more complex things in life, we definitely need the tools that only God can give us. We definitely need the tools that only He can provide. And so we're going to explore ideas and principles and approaches, again, to combat the realities of life. The realities of life is something that all of us have to deal with. We don't have a choice. The realities of life are something that we all have to deal with. And so if we have to deal with it, then it's best that we learn how as soon as possible. The sooner, the better. So we're looking at the realities, like we said last week, that bad things happen to good people, that the world can be a hateful place, that people will betray you, people will steal, and that most things in life are out of your control. Some people will walk away from you, and some people will never get to be a part of your life. You can't please everyone, and failure is inevitable. Pain is inevitable. Divorce happens, regret happens, sicknesses come out of nowhere. Time goes faster than you realize, and the greatest reality of all, that one day we all will die. Turn with me to Numbers chapter 22. And when you get there, you don't have to say he mastered it. Just say he's only getting started. Numbers chapter 22. So let's give the backstory. Numbers chapter 22, God's people, the Israelites, were on their journey out of slavery. And as they're transitioning to what God has promised them, the promised land, they encounter different groups of people who do not believe what they believe. And not only do they not believe what they believe, but they're also afraid of God's people. They're so afraid of God's people because they're hearing about all of the mighty works that God worked for his people to supernaturally deliver them out of slavery. We're aware of the 10 plagues, and we'll look at those a little bit later. But God supernaturally delivered them. What God did for his group of people was so special that people were hearing about it way before social media. In Numbers chapter 22, it says, the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of Jordan across from Jericho. We're in verse 1. It says, now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because there were many, and Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company will lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was the king of the Moabites at that time. Then he sent the messengers to Balaam, the son of Peor at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are settling next to me. He sounds afraid. Verse 6, therefore, please come at once, curse this people for me, for they are too mighty. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So the elders of the Moabites and the elders of the Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand. And they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. And he said to them, lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. So what happened is we have a king over a group of people who is so afraid of what God is doing through his people that he sought out to fight God's people on a spiritual platform. He knew that it was nothing that he was going to be able to do to defeat God's people physically in this realm. So he sought to go and have battle in the spirit realm. So down to verse 12. So Balak the king, he sends these messengers. He's like, hey, he went out to this supposed prophet, a diviner, who was someone who was supposed to have supernatural access to the spirit realm. So Balak recognizes that, hey, you know what? We're not going to be able to handle these people in the physical. If we're going to defeat these people, all the things that I heard about these groups of people, these people, we're going to have to do it in the spiritual world. So he sends these messages to this prophet. And so he wants the prophet to curse God's people in order for them to be defeated. Verse 12 says, and God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. So he's hearing from God. God is like, listen, don't go with them, right? Because you're on a dummy mission right now. Those people don't mean any good. What I have blessed, no one can curse. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, go back to your land. And in verse 14, and the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come. So they go back to the one who sent them. They're like, listen, we told him what you said. He said he didn't want to come. So go down to verse 18. Then Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me a house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more. Now, therefore, please you also stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to you, go with them, but only the words which I speak to you, you shall do. So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with them. So this time, God said, okay, it's okay, you can go with them. But only say what I tell you to say. So we're going to go down to verse 41, Numbers chapter 22 and verse 41. So it was the next day that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, that from there he might observe the extent of the people. Chapter 23. Then Balaam said to Balak, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. Go down to verse 4. And God met Balaam. And he said to him, I have prepared the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. The Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, and thus you shall speak. And he took up his oracle and said, Balak, the king of Moab has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come curse Jacob with me and come denounce Israel. That's God's people. And he says, how shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how shall I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? From the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number the 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of righteousness, and let my end be like this. Verse 11, then Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have blessed them bountifully. So we see right here, if we're going to combat life's realities, again, like last week, the first key is truth. Most people can't handle the truth. So last week we saw how when Solomon's first reaction was to go to God. And he didn't ask for material things, he asked for wisdom. But as we see illustrated in this story, this king's first response was to go to something other than God, similar to what Saul did when Saul was kicked out as king. But he didn't realize that the truth about the truth is that God is sovereign, and that whatever he blesses, nobody can unwind that and curse it. Verse 16, it says, then the Lord met Balaam and put a word in his mouth and said, go back to Balak, and thus you shall speak. So he came to him, and there he was standing by his burnt offering, and the princes of Moab were with him. And Balaam said to him, what has the Lord spoken? Then he took up the oracle and said, rise up, Balak, and hear, listen to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He's telling you plain and simple. I know what you want me to do. I know what you gave me. but it doesn't matter. There is no power, there is no force that can override what God has for his people. And so the truth of the matter is, when we're going up against life's realities, all of those different ones that we just named, what God has set for us, the seal of protection that he has put around us, nobody can reverse that. Nobody. Doesn't matter how much money. Similar to what Job said. What did Satan say to God when he came around? He's like, Satan, where you coming from? And Satan responded with going to and fro, basically raising hell, right? And so he said, I tried to get to Job, but I couldn't get to him. Why? Because you put a hedge around him. You did that. The power and the force that God has, he puts around his people to protect us. And nobody or nothing can override that. So the harsh reality is that most people already have, still are, and will reject God. That's just the truth. It's interesting because everybody said they liked that story last week about the truth, the naked truth. So those who didn't hear, truth and lie were twin brothers, and they went to go set off on a race. On the count of three, they both were going to jump inside of the water. So 1, 2, 3, truth jumped in, lie stayed on the shore. Lie made his way back to town, but when he left, he took truth's clothes. He dressed himself in the truth. So you have the lie dressed in truth. So then Truth realized that, hey, nobody else was around. He swam back and he said, you know what? My clothes aren't here, so I'm going into town just as I am. People gonna have to see me. So when he got to town, everybody was like, man, what are you doing? They were uncomfortable. They didn't like what they saw. But Truth was not gonna change his outfit. It just is what it is. The naked truth. Regardless. So I was looking this week, and so I did find another story. Otra historia, but I am not going to give it to you now. Of course, I'm going to give you something else. It says, the closest, nearest, and dearest place to communicate with truth is within yourself. All truth passes through stages. First is ridicule. Second is violently opposed. Third is accepted as being self-evident. It says the truth is rarely pure and never simple. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Better to be slapped with the truth than to kiss with a lie. Honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom. The truth will set you free, but not until it's finished with you. And as the famous line goes, most people say, you can't handle the truth. The truth was that God's people are protected from the harsh realities of life. We're not exempt from them. We have to go through them. That will always be the case until he comes back and sets up his kingdom here on earth. God's people are always going to be protected. Our job is to respond to the truth in the way that God has always intended for us to do it. So in Numbers, let's finish up the story. It says in verse 16, it says, the Lord met Balaam. This is the second prophecy. Go down to verse 19. It says, God is not a man that he shall lie. Let's go over to verse 25. Numbers 23, verse 25. It says, then Balak said to Balaam, neither curse them at all, nor bless them at all. So Balaam answered and said to Balak, did I not tell you, saying that the Lord speak, whatever? Didn't I tell you, man, I can only say what God told me to say. I told you that before. I told you before you sent your messengers. I told you when they went back to you the first time. And I told you when the second time when God told me it was okay to go with you all. Verse 27, then Balak said to Balaam, please come, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God that you may curse them there for me. So he thinks it's in the place. So maybe if we go to a different location, then it'll work. I got it. Now it'll work. Let's go somewhere else. So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor that overlooks the wasteland. Then Balaam said to Balaam, build for me there 7 altars, and 7 rams, 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balak did as Balaam had said and offered a bull and a ram for every altar. So then we're going over to chapter 24. Let's go down to verse 10. Well, no, let's go to verse 3. Then he took up his oracle and said, the utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, the utterance of the man whose eyes are open, the utterance of him who opens the word of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with open eyes wide. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens by the riverside, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. He shall pour water from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. They live in agricultural times, so they knew exactly what he was saying. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. He shall consume the nations, his enemies. He shall break their bones and pierce them with arrows. He bows down. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion who shall arouse him. Blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you. So then in verse 10, Balak just got all upset. He's like, listen, I called you to curse them, and you have blessed them, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So then let's go over to verse 17. It says, I see him, but now, this is the 4th time. The 4th time he's tried to get Balaam to curse God's people. Verse 17 says, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall arise out of Israel. He's talking about Christ. It's a prophecy that's explaining that Jesus Christ is going to come down the line thousands of years from now in that time period. So then, verse 19, out of Jacob, one shall have dominion. Then he looked up on Amalek, and he took up his oracle and said, Amalek was first among the nations, but shall be last until he perishes. Then he looked on the Kenites, and he took up his oracle and said, firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in the rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be burned, and how long Asher carries you captive. Verse 25. So Balaam rose and departed and returned to his place. Balak also went his way. The truth about truth is that God is a rock. There's no power higher than him. When he wants something to happen, it will happen. When he sets certain things in place, there's nothing or nobody or any force that can change that or reverse that. That's the truth. And we have to have that perspective. We have to have that structure if we're going against life's harsh realities. And that's a fact. It's going to happen. In John 17, verse 17, it says, Christ was praying, and he says, to sanctify us with what? The truth. He didn't say sanctify us with something that's mixed with a bunch of other stuff, which is guile. He says sanctify us with the truth and set them apart. So we're set apart. Set apart from what? We're set apart from a world full of lies. We're set apart from a world that pushes certain agendas that go against what God has for us. That's just the truth. And you cannot go against life's harsh realities without having God's truth. Do you agree? Yeah. Turn me to Exodus, the 8th chapter. And as we just said, God was delivering his people out of slavery. But we know that it was a gradual process because they were under the jurisdiction and the brutal dictatorship of one Pharaoh. And so he refused to release his grip off God's people, and he would go back and forth and he would change his mind. So he would have God send all these different plagues. And then when it got really bad, Pharaoh was like, okay, y'all can go. And then he would come back and change his mind. You know what? Y'all come back. Then he would say, you know what? He'd get hit with another plague. Okay, it's bad. Y'all get out of here. I'm sick of y'all. Y'all leave. Then he would do what? Change his mind and tighten up his grip again. He finally did that after God took his people through the Red Sea. He changed his mind again. And he went chasing after God's people. Exodus chapter 8. And we're going to look at verse 16. So the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land so that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. So this is one of the plagues. This is the third plague. Verse 17, and they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, and it became lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Now the magicians so worked with their enchantment to bring forth lice, but they could not. So as this process was going on, there were individuals on the other side, on Pharaoh's side, that were trying to mirror what God was doing because they were tapped into the dark side of the spiritual realm. So when Moses threw his rod down, they threw their rod down too. But they were sorcerers. The source of their power was from somewhere else. So they thought that because they had a limited amount of power, that they were on the right track. Because they were in a sense able to mirror what God was telling his people to do. So then in verse 19 it says, then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. So even they recognize, they're like, oh, like that one right there, I don't know if we can really reproduce that. But Pharaoh's heart grew hard and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had said. So these are your men on your side that are able to work certain things spiritually, so to speak. And they're telling you. But why was Pharaoh not able to receive what his people were telling him? Because of his heart. One of the major keys to people not being able to deal with harsh realities in life is because their heart isn't right. They have heart issues. It's not a physical heart. It's not something you can touch with your hand, but it has just as much, if not way more impact on people. The heart. So it says heart grew hard, and so he didn't heed it. So then we go down to, let's go to chapter 9. And in Exodus chapter 9, verse. Exodus chapter 9 and verse 1. No, Exodus chapter 9, verse 33. Exodus chapter 9, verse 33. It says, so Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh. So now they're on the 7th plague. There were 10 of them. So if I had seen 7 supernatural things happen like this every single time someone came to me and told me something, it wouldn't have taken 7 of them. Verse 33, so it says, Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to the Lord. Then the thunder and the hail ceased, and rain was not poured on all the earth. And Pharaoh saw that rain, the hail, the thunder had ceased. He sinned yet more and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hard, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. So here we go again. He had the back and forth going. His heart was not able to allow him to not only accept the truth, but he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't respond with it the right way. He couldn't respond with it the right way. It says one Hebrew word describing the hardening of Pharaoh's heart has the connotation of making the heart heavy. This will be a major disadvantage within Egypt's religion, in which a person needed a light heart. So the language that the Bible is using is descriptive of truth that Pharaoh already believes inside of his own belief system, because he doesn't believe in the God of the Bible. So the Egyptians believed you needed a light heart rather than a heavy heart and a sinful heart. After death. So they believe you needed that after death to favorably weigh on the God's balance scale. They believe in some nonsense. They believe in false gods. The idiom was used of strength and of self-restraint shown while serving at court to ensure that a person's heart would declare innocence to the gods. A heart-shaped scarab made of precious stone was placed on the chest of the mummified body. So basically, the Bible is describing Pharaoh's heart condition in a way opposite of the way that Pharaoh actually needed his heart to be. They believed in the afterlife. They believed that certain things would happen, that so to speak, your heart will be weighed on a scale. And if it were too heavy, you would not get to where you want to be. He has a heart issue. His heart would not allow him to accept the truth. The truth was God set a seal on his people, and he's telling you to let them go. You don't want to do that. And because you didn't want to do that, you died the death you died. Because you didn't want to do that, you faced certain consequences. It's the same thing with people in this life. If we don't have the right type of heart, if our heart is too heavy, we can't deal with the harsh realities of life. We can't deal with people walking away from us. We can't deal with people wronging us and doing things that they shouldn't be doing to us. We can't properly interpret people's actions toward us because our heart is not where it's supposed to be. It's too heavy. Turn me to Matthew chapter 13. In Matthew, the 13th chapter, Jesus is giving a parable. He's giving a parable, an imaginary story to tell and illustrate a real spiritual truth that's going to impact us in a world that we can't always see. So it says, on the same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea, and great multitudes gathered by him. So anytime he would speak, tons of people would gather around. Verse 3, then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, behold, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seed. Not weed. he sowed some, no weed, guys. He didn't sow any weed. He sowed some seed. He smoked some. He sowed some seed that fell by the wayside. That's the word I'm looking for, wayside. And some of the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth in the earth. But when the sun came out, it scorched it because there was no root, and it withered away. Then he sowed some seed among the thorns, but the thorns sprang up and choked them. Then he sowed some seed on good ground and yielded a crop. So 3 different scenarios. Sow it this time, it doesn't take root. Sow it a second time, for this reason, it doesn't take root. Sow it this time on good ground, and it takes root. And it yields a crop. And again, they're talking about agricultural terms, so they know exactly what he's talking about. He's speaking their language because they lived off of the land. So yield 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. And the disciples came to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered them and said, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given to understand. So let's skip over to verse 18. It says, therefore hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the wicked one comes and snatches what was sown in their heart. So he's like, anytime somebody try to tell you about God and you're not always understanding it, it's because there's a spiritual influence that's happening to you while you can't understand it. That's why we said last week, the natural man can't receive it. We can't understand the things of God without his help. We got to have his help to understand it. So when you're talking to somebody, they don't understand, because it's not that they don't want to understand. Some people just aren't receptive to it, and that's one thing. But some people want to, but they can't, because there's a spiritual influence that's impacting them. It's impacting their heart. So then he says, this is the seed that was sown by the wayside. But then those that were sown, the seed that was sown on stony grounds, he hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, but it has no root in himself. So the second situation, they hear what God is saying. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Perfect, bet, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try to do that. And then after a while, they fall off. because it didn't take root in their heart. Then, yet he who has no root in himself. And then it says, for when tribulation comes, persecution arises, and then they stumble. So things happen, and then life circumstances happen, and they're not able to follow through with what they want to. They have every intention, they just can't. Now he who receives seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. But he who received the seed on the good ground is he who hears the word, understands it, and he does something with it. Different situations, different responses. Only thing that was different was their heart. Their heart, the nature and the posture of their heart allowed them to be receptive to what God is telling them. The nature of their heart allowed them to be receptive to the truth about life. So that's one of the reasons why I love Christianity, because it's not just a religion, it's the truth about life. Now, there are lots of good people in this world, and there are tons of other belief systems, but none of them can claim what Christianity claims. Christianity says we are separate and distinct because of what our Savior and our Creator has done. He died and he came back from the dead. Nobody else has done that. Right. Nobody else told you ahead of time that they were going to do that and then did it. Because anybody can claim to be God. I can tell you I'm God, but then I would have to prove that. Not everybody can prove that. So what is he saying? He's saying your heart is determining your path. Your heart, the condition of your heart is determines how receptive you are to the truth about life. That's how people get to the end of their life, 80, 90 years old, and they got regrets and they're bitter about life because they had a heart issue. One of the worst things is for people to miss out on life because of the condition of their heart. The heart needs to be changed. The heart needs to be in a different place. It says the only lasting beauty is the beauty of the heart. Among the things you can give and still keep are your word, a smile, and a grateful heart. Benjamin Franklin said, the heart of a fool is in his mouth, but the mouth of a wise man is in his heart. Know in your heart that all things are possible. We couldn't conceive a miracle if none had been done. Put your heart, your mind, and your intellect and soul even into the smallest acts. This is the secret of success. Go to your bosom, knock there, and ask your heart what it doth know. William Shakespeare said that. One day with life and heart is more than enough time to find a world. And a good heart is better than all the heads in the world. The heart. It's that invisible, intangible thing that people can't always see. See, we live in a world where most people respond to physical things. Got to be able to touch it. That's why we got the phrase, seeing is believing, right? But we don't realize that the things that impact the world the most are the things that we can't always see. Can't always see somebody's heart. You can look at somebody and you can't really tell. You don't necessarily know what they've been through in life. You can't really tell because we don't always have those eyes to see. Now, God can show us, but it doesn't mean that you can look at somebody and just tell how the condition of their heart. Not even all the time by their actions either. Because people can do good things with a bad heart. It's the heart that's going to determine how receptive we are to receiving the truth in order to combat life's problems, in order to combat life's issues. It said, I would rather have eyes that cannot see, ears that cannot hear, lips that cannot speak, than a heart that cannot love. Love is all of its passions, the strongest for it attacks simultaneously the head, the heart, and the senses. The heart has reasons that reason does not understand. And Zig Ziglar said, among the things you can give are still small, among the things you can give and keep are your word, a smile, and a grateful heart. That's powerful. You can close your eyes to the things you don't want to see, but you can't close your heart to the things you don't want to feel. Who do y'all think said that? It's an actor.
Denzel Washington.
Nah. He is my favorite actor, but no, he's not. Johnny Depp said that. Let your heart guide you. It whispers, so listen closely. Walt Disney said that. The point is, the heart, the nature, the condition, and the state of our heart is beyond vital. It's beyond vital. We have to have the right type of heart. And that's one of my prayers, is that I have the right type of heart. Turn me to Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs chapter 4, and in verse 23, it says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. That's exactly what we're talking about, the issues of life. What is he saying? He's saying if your heart isn't right, certain things are going to come out and they're going to impact you in a negative way. So I'm warning you to be careful with your heart. Be careful with it, because out of it springs the issues of life. The heart is so important that in many cases, it is a deciding factor that determines how we respond to life's issues. If it isn't right, then most likely people will respond in an unproductive, inefficient way. It's super important. He's like, keep it. Keep your heart with diligence. When you keep something with diligence, you don't just keep it. Like I keep the keys to my classroom and I just keep it. Sometimes I might leave the house without it, like I did this week. I keep it though. But my car key is a little bit more important. So I can't leave that. I keep it with diligence. I watch where I put it down. I watch who I let hold it. Why? Because of how it impacts me. I keep it with diligence. The writer is saying the same thing. He's saying, keep your heart like that. Keep your heart in the same way that you would keep something that's super, super, super important to you. That's why the same way, that's why Christ was correcting and chastising those individuals who were claiming to do good things, but it was masked with the wrong type of heart. He's like, y'all are saying, he's like, I know y'all so caught up in this legalistic way of things. He's like, I know y'all are saying that y'all using that money to take care of your parents, but the truth of the matter is you don't even really care about your parents. Mm-hmm. They had this law that they were supposed to donate. There was a certain amount of money that was set aside to take care of their parents. But then Christ was like, your heart isn't. That's why when at the end of his life, right before he was about to be betrayed, he told Judas, he said, go ahead, I know what you're about to do, man. Go ahead and do it quick. He's like, most of y'all sitting right here, y'all are clean, but one of y'all's heart ain't right. And I already know which one it is. He's saying the heart is super important. Turn with me to Romans chapter 7. Romans chapter 7. One of the key pieces, again, to combating life circumstances, is knowing and doing. Knowing and doing. In Romans chapter 7, and in verse 15, Paul is talking. And he says, for what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I don't practice. But what I hate, that's what I do. He's like, man, I just don't understand this. He's like, what I'm doing right now is all of the things that I don't want to do. I know it's wrong, I don't want to do. But guess what? The thing that I want to do, I don't do. What is he describing? He's describing that internal battle and that struggle that comes with being a believer, not just being a human, but also being a believer. Knowing and doing. So one of the keys to combating life's harsh realities is not just the first part, which is knowing. We all know what to do. It's doing it. That's the hard part. That's the tricky part. And we end up with that look on the face like that baby. Now, y'all know that's one of my favorite pictures, so I had to find a way to put that one inside of this fire one. Okay? That was the best I could come up with, all right? She like, I know what to do, Mom. I know, but doing it right now ain't really a top priority for me. Like, we all know we should eat right, but doing it. We know we should hit the gym or exercise or whatever, but we don't always do it. I know the key to being more disciplined is, and you fill in the blank, whatever that is for you, but doing it. And so Paul, man who wrote almost half of the New Testament, he's telling you, he's like, listen, that thing that keeps me from doing it. Verse 19, no, verse 18, it says, for I know that in me, that's my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good, I do not know, I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I don't do. So I want to do good, but I don't do it. But the evil that I don't want to do, that's what I do. He says, now if I do what I will not to do, it is no longer I, but sin that dwells in me. So he's like, that's the root cause of why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I don't do what I should do. Verse 24, he says, "O wretched man that I am, O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord." He's like, all I got for you is like, I know the problem, I know the root of it, but I don't always do it. Turn me to James, the first chapter. We're going to go from chapter 1 and then chapter 2. In James chapter 1, it's really quick. It says, be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. It's like you all, if you look at a lot of the New Testament letters, they will open the letters up with exhortations, commending them for not only receiving God's truth, but also talking about, in some ways, how hard it was to do it. They're like, hey, the last time I visited you, awesome job. But there's still one thing among you all. He says, be doers of the word, not only hearers. So he's saying at some point you have to do that thing that you know you should do. There is no way around it. And then in James chapter 2 and in verse 14, he says, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. It's like eventually, it's good to believe. But you gotta do something. It's awesome to believe. And he goes on to say, even the devils believe. But guess what? You're going to have to put something with that knowing. You have to put something with that knowing. And they say the biggest gap in the world is the gap that lies between knowing and doing. It's the biggest gap. The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Courage is knowing what not to fear. It says many men go fishing all their lives without knowing that it is not fish they are after. Mr. Guns like to fish.
I think I'm after some fish.
It says knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Knowledge and action combined can win over any adversity known to man. They used to have a phrase back in the day, knowledge is power. Yes, if you do something with it. We know what to do, but man, it's just hard sometimes. The two greatest fear busters are knowledge and action. Greatest fear busters, knowledge and action. So what am I communicating? What am I saying? We all know what to do. We just don't always do it. But like Nike said, just do it. That's how you combat life's realities. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm very health conscious. And so one of the things I like to do is I like to exercise. And I try to hit the gym at least a handful of times a week, right? But very rarely do I always feel like going. Probably if I had to give a percentage, maybe about 70-30, I'll feel like going. So at least almost half the time I don't feel like going. But if I only did what I felt like doing, I wouldn't have this. Come on, guys. Come on now. Come on. If I only did what I felt like doing. And so sometimes when I'm having those moments where I don't always feel like doing it, I'll call people and I'll say, man, if anybody ever tells you that I did not, or that I always felt like doing it, then you know that it's not true. So we have to do it. We know that we should pray, don't always feel like doing it. We know that we should pray for our enemies. We definitely don't always feel like doing that. We know we should make that call, or we know we should do something that's opposite of what I feel like doing, that goes consistent with what the scripture says, but because of what's also inside of me, I don't always do it. Plain and simple. Knowing versus doing. That's the biggest gap. So like the word says, it says, ask for wisdom, ask for strength, ask for that so that when we don't, we can do it. I think about it too in a simple term too. When Christ was about to pay the ultimate price, what did he say? He said, if there is another way, didn't feel like doing that. Like he knew he had to because that was the only way. But then he's like, I got to do it. And if he's our high priest, if he's the one that stands in the gap between us and the Father, then we look at him as our example in order to combat life's harsh realities. Because responding, because we all have had people that have wronged us in one way or another, and we know what our initial response is. People have stolen from us. People have lied to us. People have wrong. Well, the list goes on and on and on and on. And we know what we want to do, and we know what we ought to do. Knowing versus doing. Turn me to Matthew chapter 10. And when you get there, say he's almost done.
I want you to continue.
Matthew chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 1. Well, let's start in verse 5. It says, let's go to verse 1. Verse 1. It says, when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sicknesses and diseases. So Christ's inner circle, his 12 followers, he gave them power because they were about to embark on a journey where they needed such. Then over in verse 5, it says, these 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out the demons. Freely you have received, freely you give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. Now, whatever city or town you enter and acquire, who in it is worthy, and stay there till you get out. And then go into a household, greet it. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. What is he saying? He's saying you're going to go on a journey. And when you go on this journey, some people are going to want to hear what you got to say, and some people not. And so we talked last week about communication with God, and it's like, okay, most of the time when we talk about communication with God, we think about it from his perspective. Okay, he isn't answering me, right? But then when you think about it, a lot of times we don't answer God. We don't always answer him. We're not always as receptive to what he has to say because it goes against what I want. That's the truth. So communication with God is obviously a key to combat life's harsh realities, because obviously we have to be in communication with him. But guess what? It's not just a one-way street. It's not just a one-way street. And it says, whoever will not receive you, nor hear your words, when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. So he's like, if you go there and they ain't trying to listen to what you got to say, respond like this. Get your peace back and keep it moving. And let me deal with it. Because another one of the harshest realities, and this is, other than death, this is likely the harshest reality, is that some people, not even some, because the Bible says many, a lot of people are going to reject God himself. And then when they reject him and he's the only way, then by default, you are locked out. The Bible describes it as weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because there's going to come a point in time where people are not, have not, currently not, and will not be receptive to what God is trying to say. Guys, like, communication is a one-way street. Every time we talk, it's because you talking to me. You're not listening to what I'm saying. You telling me what you want. And so I've tried to make it a habit of mine where when I have silent time, I'm not saying anything. I'm just like, you know what? Go ahead, Lord, you speak. Then I'll write down what I believe he's telling me. Or I'll reflect on something that may have happened during that time period or whatever that is consistent with the word that could be him communicating with me. Rejection. Over in Matthew chapter 7, in verse 13, it says, enter by the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who find it. Rejection. He's telling you ahead of time, there is going to be many people. Many people are going to find a way outside of God. And there are natural consequences that come along with that, just like any other decision. Because he's like, it's only 2 ways. Then it says in 14, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way that leads to life. There are a few who find it. I mean, if you stop and ask the average person, like, hey, how much time you spend talking to God? Not judgment, just how much time? Few who find it. 2-way street. People always say, man, God didn't answer my prayers. But they're not always talking to God. When that message of the kingdom was sent out, that's God communicating with people. They didn't answer the call. So people say, God didn't answer me, you didn't answer him. That's what the word says. Our ears have been deaf to a certain extent to the truth about life, to the truth about the kingdom. Turn me to Jeremiah chapter 29. And in Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 11, it says, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. He says, you're going to pray to me and I'm going to listen to you. Because I know what I've always had for you. I know you were raised in a world where you didn't really know who I was, and you were surrounded by circumstances that cut you off from me. But I've always had good plans for you. I've always wanted to talk to you. And as a matter of fact, I've always wanted to answer you when you said something to me. You just say all the time, you can't hear me all the time. Then it says, and you seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. There goes the heart again. Got to give all of it to him. It says, search for him with all your heart. And it says, I will be found by you. Picture like a little kid just running and tackling an adult when they, playing hide and go seek. Oh, you found me. That's how God is. He's like, oh, you found me. Why? Because you wanted to. You wanted to with all your heart. Your heart was right. You wanted to find me. It's super, super important. Communication with our Creator is one of the major keys in order to fight life's circumstances, fight the harsh realities. But we got to remember that it isn't just a one-way street. It should be a two-way street, going up and coming down. We got to make time for that. So the truth is something that we acknowledge it. We acknowledge that it already is. It's not something that we create. It's not something that we put together. It's something that just is. That's why scientists and other people who work in that field, they're always discovering something that adds credibility to what the word says. Why? Not because they made it, but because they just discovered it. We say that heart issues, that some people aren't receptive to the truth about life a lot of times, and they're not able to deal with those harsh realities because their heart isn't always in the right place. We know that knowing and doing is the biggest gap that exists. We all know what to do. We just have to do it. We have to bridge that gap. We have to do things that we don't always feel like doing. And we know the communication with our Creator is a two-way street, and that he wants to respond to us because he's always had good plans for us. And he says that he will be found by us once we do that.